So we started with session 1, the food security and nutrition panel discussion, where we where the panelists talked about some of the WFP and FAO assessments and how about 43% of the country is not going to be able to afford nutritious meals in the upcoming future, and what are some of the key challenges. And also the companies participating shared about some of the great initiatives they were currently doing, especially the panelists were from Haley's and LPTA plantations, and they shared some of the food security and nutrition initiatives that were currently undergoing in the plantation sector to address those gaps. And we also had a representative from PHDT to give their insight, because it's not only the workforce of plantations, but also the non-workers and how that needed to be addressed. Over to you. For
the other parallel session was creating a protective environment for children living in the estate communities. So there also we had a representation from the plantation companies, development agencies, civil society, as well as the government, the National Child Protection Authority. So there we basically discuss about emerging child protection risk in this current context, and it was discussed about the child trafficking, school dropouts, the children's go hunger and associated risk based on that, and also what are the gaps in the services and responses provided by government and other agencies, especially children and families who are in the estate sector, there are barriers to accessibility, and how these, the corporate and the development and the government sector could work collaboratively in addressing those matters. So the main concern highlighted there was raising awareness among children and parents, as well as use more child-friendly interventions to educate all the stakeholders.
And session 3 was on gender equality and justice. We went through a lot of key points, and starting from why tea picking is not considered a skilled labor and what can be done, and what were the panelists' opinions and suggestions on making it skilled. And also some of the great initiatives that some of the companies were doing in leadership development and women's skilling and progression in their careers. And we also spoke about one of the points that Menaha raised here about dignity of work. That was a major topic that we discussed, and especially including the point about access to toilets. And the consensus was basically that there was recognition that dignity of work is especially important right of every individual, every human being. And as such, there needed to be collaboration amongst all the stakeholders, and that's a discussion that will be moving forward further as well. It's been a continuing discussion, but it will be taken forward as well.
Yeah, the other panel discussion was climate change impact on tea sector. They are basically discuss about how the climate change has impacted on tea industry, and how the tea industry has impacted on climate change, and also how the climate change is affecting on children, mothers and their families. So it was discussed about alternative ways how we could address these climate changes, as well as how we go along with this global context in the change of the climate change, collaborative effort we should take. And it was highlighted the lack of data and research in Sri Lanka, and also kind of a backward attitude towards taking proactive actions to address existing gaps.
And then session 5 was on access to quality education, where some of the barriers of accessing quality education faced by children living in tea communities at large. That was a key point of discussion, and how some of those barriers were being addressed by the different companies as well. Like the panelists was from Haley's and Eastwood Brothers. They shared their initiatives of how they are supporting access to quality education. And we also had Child Fund sharing what they were trying to do in terms of maths and science learning, which is a very key subject area that children need to go through to go ahead with their secondary school education. And especially the Central Province also shared some of their affirmative action pathways that they are undertaking in recognition of the fact that there's a key teacher resource gaps in a lot of the schools across the districts where tea estates are also concentrated. So there was a lot of discussion on some of the potential affirmative actions, but the consensus was that this needs stakeholder collaboration, not just the government, not just private sector stakeholders, but also development agencies to come in, and that support needs to be continuous, and also looking at not just basics of education, but how the bridge can be built to bring children in plantation communities as well to the rest of the country and globally. So that was...
So in parallel to that, we discuss about adolescence and youth skills development. So the main areas focused during that discussion was what are the barriers for youth to engage in vocational trainings, the current context of available courses, available trainings, and need of innovative approaches in reaching out to youth and introducing them with practical pathways in developing their careers, and also how youth could be engaged through participatory approaches, because the available opportunities are not really catering the demand or the interest of the young people. We also got to know about available opportunities from the vocational training centers, some of the civil societies who are introducing, and some of the international approaches in terms of engaging young people, and some of the initiatives taken by plantation companies like Bogavantalawa. So in other discussions also, I should highlight that the companies were shared the best or the good practices they have initiated in terms of addressing these challenges as progressive measures to addressing the existing focus areas that we were discussed about.